Good morning, everybody. I hope you all are back to your seats and in front of your screens because we are beginning with our next session from Hyderabad chapter about building resiliency in a systematic manner. We have Ritvik Mishra, who is a board member of National Training Lab, with us to share his insights on this topic. And before we begin with the session, let me thank our founding sponsor, Innovation Roots, which is a leading consulting and training service provider and helping organizations to achieve business agility and beyond. It is one of the leaders and pioneers of niche publishing services and well known for the content collaboration with global thought leaders, authors, and creators. You can find out more details at www.innovationroots.com. We are also happy to have Gile, which is a product offering from Tata Consultancy Services. And it is a purely cloud-based enterprise agile planning tool and has DevOps capabilities. Enterprises can use Gile to adopt agile practices or scale across multiple Scrum and Kanban teams using enterprise scaling frameworks such as SAFe, Disciplined Agile, LESS, and more. You can try out Gile for free for up to 20 users for 30 days by signing up at gile.io, or you can reach out to us for any kind of inquiries you have or you want to set up an exclusive product demo. Check out the Gile page on Agile Network India website for more information. You can find the link in the chat box. Thank you so much. And I'm really happy to have you, Ritvik, for this session today. And before we begin, as we are talking about building resiliency, let me bring one interesting thing. The legend Thomas Edison, he would have failed thousands of times before he got it right for the light bulb. And we can imagine him failing almost every day, and that's an amazing example of building resilience for me because he bounced back from the setbacks. He didn't settle with his failures. And I think when I think about building resilience, that's the most striking example that I get. And we are excited to know more from you, Ritvik, on how we can build it in a systematic manner. So over to you, Ritvik.
Thank you so much, Nupur, and thank you for setting that context so well. I had a whole story as well planned, but I think I'll go with your story. I think it's so important for all of us, especially in the current situation, to look at how can we systematically build resiliency in our employees. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session on building resiliency. It's great to be here with all of you. I hope you've had some good sessions before this. To begin with, I do want to acknowledge the tough situation that we are all in. I do hope that you, your friends, and your family are safe and doing well. And for those amongst us that have been impacted by this pandemic, our prayers are with you, and we hope that you and your family and friends come out of the situation safely and very quickly. To just a very high level introduction about myself. I've been in the learning and development and the OD space for the last 20 years, primarily focused on leadership development and defining and institutionalizing learning strategies for organizations across 4 industries and 2 geographies. I'm currently a board member with the National Training Labs. This is one of the oldest training organization in the world. It was set up by Kurt Lewin, who is considered as the father of OD in 1946. And they are primarily in the space of providing services on applied behavioral sciences. I finished my master's in organizational development when I began my career in OD and L&D, and was recently able to complete my doctorate in HR and OB from IIM Lucknow. And we'll see some of the results of that work in the presentation today. So let's look at the overall objectives of this session. At a very high level, there are 4 broad objectives for the session. One is we'll try and understand the need for resilience in the current context and environment. We will then look at the importance or significance of a team organization, team leader, and team member We will then bring both these concepts together and look at how can we strengthen the relationship at workplace and thereby influence and enhance employee resilience. So we are basically looking at resilience from two lenses. One is employee resilience at the organization in the workplace. And the second is looking at resilience from the team leader, team member relationship perspective. And so by the end of this session, you will have practical tips on how you can enhance your workplace relationship, thereby influencing the resilience or the capacity of resilience. So let's look at the context first. So pre-pandemic, you had several of these factors that were disrupting the world. Technology was changing on a daily basis. We had artificial intelligence, machine learning, RPA, IoT, blockchain coming in and disrupting our workplace. Traditional business models were being disrupted and digitized. And so you had cab companies that didn't own any cars. You had hospitality companies that didn't own any real estate. You had banks that didn't have physical presence. Organizations were also disrupting their traditional talent models. So no longer did you have the traditional team leader, team member reporting structure, but you had a more distributed structure. You had gig economy coming in. You had contract workers coming in to take on specific jobs. Most organizations were impacted also by globalization and trends in across the world. Skills were now being focused on reskilling and upskilling. Regulations were impacting the way organizations were operating, especially in a global environment. Now, as we all know, we've heard this, that all these factors were leading to something called VUCA, and we've heard this quite often. But what happened recently was that this VUCA environment got suddenly hit by several other factors. The biggest among them, of course, being the pandemic and it changing the way we operate. And now looking in the long term, we will be operating in a new normal. Political instability, racial tensions, global economic slowdown, and record levels of unemployment. Now, what this did to the VUCA environment was that it suddenly increased its intensity manyfold. So just to quickly ask the audience, what has been the hardest thing for you to manage in this phase? Was it the personal well-being, work-life segregation, virtual engagement with teams, or any other thing? Can I ask Nupur to read out some of the comments that might be coming in on the chat, please? Survival, absolutely. Sure. It was, focused on just trying to get through this phase.
We have virtual engagement as a response. Yep. Personal well-being, work-life separation, loss of folk in friends and family circle, virtual engagement, keeping calm. Virtual engagement is shared one more person. So.
Yeah, so I think, virtual engagement came across quite a bit, and that's so true. There was, we did some studies at the organization I'm with, and a lot of people said earlier I could just walk up to my team member or team leader, tap on the shoulder and get some responses. Now I have to set up a whole Zoom meeting for the same thing, and it's adding to my project hours, but those hours are not being considered in the overall project engagement. So definitely virtual engagement was a big concern for us. Now, when you look at this intense environment that we are all living in, there are several factors that kicked in to help us or support us in managing this crisis. One was, of course, leadership styles, the way leaders were responding. And it's quite heartening to see that we traditionally had not built leaders to manage this kind of an environment, but from their own experiences and expertise, they were trying to do their best. We saw people tap into their informal network, their coaches, their mentors, just as a lot of you have said, to stay calm and to keep the virtual engagement going. A lot of organizations started to support not just their own set of employees, but they have, even in the current wave, they have started to support the nation as well. Our own behaviors and attributes shifted in the way we were engaging at the workplace with our peers, and that enabled some of us to manage the crisis. Our formal relationships at work also started to help us manage the work and the crisis that we were seeing. We saw a lot of solidarity, camaraderie kick in, and a lot of collaboration happen just to help each other out in this scenario. And so the focus of our session is going to be on behaviors and relationships. So just a reiteration of that, we will look at relationships. Specifically within relationships, we will focus on the team leader, team member relationship and how that influenced some of our own behaviors and actions that led us to build resiliency to manage crisis and disruptions. So just a quick ask to the audience, what has helped you most in managing this phase? Was it the leadership styles of your team leader? Was it the support extended by the organization? Maybe your own informal network, your mentors, or any other mechanism or tool that you tapped in to manage this current situation?
So Tanya says all of the above, and Sohail says organizational support. Betty is saying mentors. Asi Goel says always ready to communicate. And Navina says organizational support. And Amit Agrawal is saying both first and second options, leadership style and organization support play important roles. Jayashankar is saying organization support.
Yeah, so I think, definitely organizational support played a big role, and kudos to the organization on how they quickly pivoted. And their pivot is also a recognition of how our leaders were driving that organization in that phase. So it's a combination of leadership styles and the leaders and the organizational support that was available to us. So now we've established the context, we have understood the kind of environment that we are all in and therefore the need for resiliency. We now get into the first component of resiliency itself. And at the bottom, at the foundation of resiliency, it requires the presence of adversity or crisis, because it is defined itself as the ability of employees to bounce back or overcome disruptions. And therefore, it requires traits like positivity, empathy, or self-efficacy. In fact, as positivity is one of the pillars for positive psychology as well, which researchers have often quoted as a key driver to performance at the workplace, others being optimism, hope, and self-efficacy. Now, given that these are the traits that are needed to build resiliency, researchers have also mentioned that this is a developable capability rather than a fixed personality trait. And so if you put all this together in a definition, employee resilience is being defined as capability which is facilitated, supported by the organization to utilize resources continually and adapt, even when faced with challenging situations. Now, there are three things that really come out in this definition. One, it's a capability, and therefore you can develop it. Two, you certainly require the organizational support in order to develop that, which we saw in our previous polling question as well. And most important, it is the ability for individuals and employees to adapt, which basically means that they are learning from how they're responding to the current crisis, and therefore being able to manage and respond to bigger crises in the future. And I'm seeing a question on the chat on what do you mean by organizational support, and I'm going to come to it in some of the subsequent slides as well. So when you look at these three highlights of the definition, it basically leads us to say that the supportive environment that is needed is supportive, collaborative, and learning-oriented work environment. And that goes to one of the questions earlier on, what do you mean by the organizational support? So it needs to be supportive. You need to have a collaborative environment, and a learning-oriented work environment. Now, from there, this basically establishes the role of team leader and team member and their relationship. Team leader starts to play a significant relationship in providing team members with that supportive, collaborative, and learning-oriented. If we take another lens to resiliency, a lot of the literature has said that a key defining trait of resiliency is sense making, or the ability of employees to make meaning out of the crisis. And what that helps in doing is that the employees are able to understand the reasoning for the crisis, the constraints that they are facing, but they are also able to then identify a future state and be able to plan on how do you take yourself and your team and your organization from the current crisis to that future ideal state. And in order to do that, research has established basically three drivers or three supporting pillars. One is organizational values, interpersonal networks, and role modeling. Organizational values helps employees define a purpose for their work, define a meaning for their work. And that leads to higher engagement levels from the employees. It leads to ability to utilize the resources and information, and therefore higher levels of trust with the organization. Your interpersonal networks lead to more solidarity, more camaraderie amongst yourself, and you are able to bank on your relationships to manage strengths, to manage weaknesses, and to tap onto strengths in order to come out of the crisis. And finally, you look at role models that are displaying the behaviors that can help you manage the current crisis. Now, again, if you look at all these three elements that are helping employees manage resiliency, we also come to the realization of the role here as well of the team leader and the team member and their relationship in order to make sense of the crisis. A third way to look at this is there are just a lot of self-assessments on resiliency out there. And if you pick any of those self-assessments, you would see that there are a lot of questions that are targeted towards understanding the kind of relationship that you have at the workplace. For example, if it's ability to approach managers, having friends at the workplace, having strong, reliable networks, being able to collaborate at the workplace. So a lot of the assessments themselves are inherently trying to figure out the relationship and the strength of the relationship that you have at the workplace. Now, I've explained the scales here and the scores here. So if you want to take a quick snapshot of this, take a picture of this, and then baseline your resiliency as it stands today, feel free to do that as well. So we've understood the context and the need for us to focus on resiliency. So where are we till now? So we've looked at the context and therefore the importance of resiliency, employee resiliency specifically. We then looked at resiliency and connected it to the relationship at workplace. We are now going deeper into this facet or this construct of relationship. And I'm going to look at relationships specifically from a lens which is called LMX, or leader-member exchange theory. And that basically focuses on the team leader-team member relationship. So organizations are basically made of teams. Teams are made up of team leader and team member. And a team leader has dyadic relationship with several team members, one-on-one relationships. Some of these relationships are weak and some of these relationships are strong. This is basically called leader-member exchange theory. What it basically says that is leaders build strong relationships with some of their team members and weak relationships with remaining team members. The strong relationships are characterized by high levels of respect, trust, and are called in-group. The weak relationships are characterized by the contract and the job description and are labeled as out-group. Now, in-group members have higher access to the team leader, to resources, to information, to do their work. as opposed to the out-group members. And because of that, the in-group members receive access to strategic priorities, firm level initiatives, sponsorships, mentoring, empowerment, whereas the out group is managed using just the job contract and maintain status quo. As a result of this, the in-group members have higher levels of job satisfaction, higher levels of engagement at the workplace, display higher levels of organizational commitment and citizenship behavior. Your out group than the out group. The out group, again, you will see lower levels of engagement and higher levels of attrition. Now, at this point, there is a realization that, as we discussed earlier, the traditional talent models are being disrupted and a lot of organizations are moving away from the traditional team leader, team member hierarchy. It's more distributed, it's more spread out, and some examples being your scrum teams, gig workers, and even startups which don't have the hierarchical structure. So there is a very parallel or relatable construct to LMX, which is called as co-worker exchange, and that basically looks at the relationships between peers and relationships between delegating authorities. And it has very similar construct to LMX and very similar outcomes and impact as we saw before. Here's a quick snapshot for you, a quick survey, which is well tried and tested in research that can help you baseline your relationship as it stands today with your supervisor. Again, if you want to take a screenshot of this, the scores and the scales are given there. Post this session, you can take this survey as well and understand where your relationship stands today. So again, just trying to recap where we are. We understand that leaders create in-group and out-group. In-group enjoy stronger relationship with team members, with team leaders. And because of this stronger relationship, they have higher abilities to respond to crisis and therefore higher capacity of resiliency. So from here on, we are going to take a look at what can we specifically do then to enhance our quality of relationship and therefore impact our resilience capacity. The results that you will see are an outcome of an 8-month qualitative research work that was undertaken. We interviewed about 6 team leaders and 22 of their direct team members. It was a longitudinal study. This was conducted over 3 months, and it led to over 100 interviews being conducted. This was done at a large consulting organization which has operations in 6 industries and 4 businesses. So that gave us a good spread of complex relationships as well as a complete set of different scenarios and situations. And the outcome of this was basically what we are terming as a 6C framework. So 6 actions or attributes that team leaders can take to enhance their quality of relationship, and 6 behaviors or actions that team members can take to enhance their quality of relationship. So let's look at from a team leader perspective first. It's about being able to create a safe and respectful environment for team members, using your relationships and sponsorships to help them come out of tough situations, coaching them, mentoring them, delegating with an understanding, setting clear and unambiguous goals and expectations, having frequent, open, honest conversations and communication with them, and providing them with accurate and timely feedback. And if these are the actions and attributes, what specific actions or how do I take actions on these? So when it is about creating a safe and respectful environment, your body language matters a lot. Your tone matters a lot. So be cognizant of that. And we also conducted a research in-house that showed that if you use Socratic questions team members felt a lot more respected and trusted. And there was a higher level of empowerment to team members. And while there is a realization that you can't use Socratic questions all the time, but if you are able to use Socratic questions in most important conversations, maybe a project debrief, or maybe your regular check-ins that you have with team members, instead of directing them, if you flip the question and ask them what their inputs would be on that particular topic, there is higher level of ownership, accountability. They feel respected. They feel that they have been involved in that conversation and decision. Being able to think, look for strategic projects that you can extend to them. Look for micro coaching moments where you can talk about and give them feedback about their performance on specific activities. Understand their strengths and aspirations and delegate accordingly. Try and delegate work in a manner that utilizes strengths of most team members to the maximum extent possible. So on a daily basis, team members should be able to work on initiatives that calls upon their strengths. We'll be very extremely clear on what success looks like, what are the expectations, what are the KRAs, and also help them try and understand how they can achieve those goals. Meet regularly, try and build in some informal connects. We've seen in the study that we did, the relationships that were stronger had higher levels of informal connects. So try and connect with them outside the work environment as well, so that you are able to be themselves, they are able to be themselves, and they are able to connect with you at a personal level. Be approachable, be available to them always, and be able to provide feedback, especially at the point of delivery itself. Now, if we flip and look at team member, from a team member perspective, be humble and curious. Basically, don't be a jerk. Become a trusted partner. Understand your team leader style and flex your styles accordingly. Be very clear again on what the goals and expectations are from you and from you. Have frequent, open, honest conversations. And a big differentiator here was solve problems for your team leader. So again, if we look at what specific actions you can take to enable these, it's about maintaining a professional etiquette. It's about building reliability and credibility with the team leader through consistent performance. It's about understanding your team leader style. So how does the team leader take decisions? How do they manage risk? How do they communicate? How do they like to be communicated with? Understand these preferences and tweak your style to match your team leader's style. Be very clear, as we said earlier, be very clear with what is expected out of you, both in terms of timelines and level of delivery. Find a common ground, and this was very interesting in what we, when we did our research. Common points between a team leader and a team member led to stronger relationships. A quick example here is I was in an interview, and I knew that the interviewer was from a remote place in Uttar Pradesh. And in my interview, when he asked me, where are you from? Although I'm born and brought up in Hyderabad, I took the name of that place because I do have some relationships to that place. And immediately the interviewer thumbed the place and said, "Arey tum mere jagah ke ho," and it completely changed the tone of the interview from that point on. So look for those common points in the introductions as you are talking to your team leader. Look for those common points that can help you enhance the quality of relationship. And this was also big, given the whole focus on generalization, from moving from specialization to generalization, and given the complexity complexity of work increasing. It's important for team members to have a niche skill that can help team leaders solve certain problems. Once you have a niche skill, you become the go-to person for your team leader on that particular topic. So we looked at what can team leaders specifically do and team members specifically do to build relationships. We now take a look at how does this all combine together in the relationship journey between a team leader and a team member. So there are really three broad phases. One is the onboarding phase at the beginning, where a team leader and team member come together. And then you have the delegation phase. So the team leader, team member have got to know each other. And then the team leader starts to delegate either strategic opportunities or routine tasks. And then you have a constant ongoing engagement that exists between a team leader and team member. So if you look at the onboarding phase, from a team leader perspective, it's about creating those informal opportunities to get to know the team member and help them onboard with the organizational culture and the team culture. From a team member perspective, it is again to identify those common interest areas and use them to enhance the quality of your relationship. Also understanding very clearly what are the expectations of the role that you have taken up. And in this phase, similarity and liking play a significant role in influencing the quality of relationship. As you move on to the delegation phase, from a team leader perspective, it's understanding the capabilities and aspirations of the team member, delegating accordingly, and then providing accurate and timely feedback on that work. From a team member perspective, as I mentioned, it's about building that niche skill. And of course, one of the big things coming out was always stay in constant connect with your team leader to understand how you are doing. And from an ongoing perspective, from a team leader perspective, it was about caring and respecting the team members. And from a team member perspective, it was about being humble and building your credibility and reliability through your work. And so in the ongoing engagement, conducive behaviors played a significant role. And in the delegation phase, it was strengths and performance that played a role in enhancing the quality of relationship. So just to recap, we looked at the context, we looked at the makeup of resiliency, which basically encapsulated the leader and follower relationship. We then looked at how can we enhance the quality of that relationship and therefore influence resiliency. So my question basically is, from here on out, what are the two things that you'll start doing from tomorrow that will help you enhance the quality of your work relationship? If you can just give this a minute, feel free to use the chat window if you want to put it out there on what are those two things.
So we have a response here, Ritvik. Jay Shankar is saying, I will focus more on my niche skills.
Yeah.
Neeraj says communication and building niche skills. Jay Shankar has another input. He says that. Yeah. Jay Shankar is saying, I help and support leader for his success.
Absolutely.
In fact, we have Sudhin. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, in one of the relationships that was strongest in our study, the team member used to call up the team leader every morning to tell him of the kind of work that is coming up and the work that they were doing, and then recheck in at the end of the day just to say how things went. This was a new relationship, but it started off on a very strong note because of that constant communication that existed between them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have a lot of responses coming in. I will try reading out as much as possible. RC Goel says, be facilitator and recognize good work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Varun is saying, identify more opportunities to connect. Just a minute, I've lost the question. Identify more opportunities to connect better with my team leader and team members.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Joydeep is saying 360-degree communication and transparency and a win-to-win. I think
absolutely
win-win situation he's talking about. Tanya is saying usually we look at what leaders can do for us. However, given the situation, we must also ask ourselves what can we do for our leaders. Leadership is about how you show up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Sudipta is giving a suggestion. Yeah. So here is a suggestion by Sudipta is saying, can we convert into 2-3 infographics that team members and their mentors can keep in front of them as a visual reminder.
That's a great idea, Jayashankar, and that brings me to the next slide, which is how will you ensure accountability on things that you will change tomorrow? And some of the ways that you can do is you can identify an accountability partner, tell them that these are the 2 things that you would like to change among yourselves, and then reconnect with the partner a week down the line and see if you've made those changes. Journaling has been established as a very good way. You can jot down things on what your week looks like and what are the 2 things that you will change in that week, and then come back to it and see whether you were able to do it. Bring some of this into your current coaching and mentoring sessions that you are having. Take sessions forward with your teams. As you take sessions, you bring in more accountability to your own actions. Build in reminders and emails, so use technology to keep reminding you of your promise that you've made. So these are some ways you can build accountability, but absolutely, if you all want, I can go back to those 2 slides. You can take a picture of this and take a printout and keep it in your workplace on what you can change from here on. So this is again from a team member perspective, and then so that's the end of the content that I wanted to cover. I saw some questions come in on the chat. Happy to have a conversation. So maybe I can stop sharing at this point in time and come back to the main screen.
Hello, Ritvik. I think Nupur has dropped. So Prashant here.
Yeah, Prashant, please tell me.
Yeah, there are a couple of more questions.
Sure.
One from Shantanu. He says, we know autonomy, purpose, and mastery helps people to be motivated and engaged.
Yeah.
I didn't see much about autonomy and mastery in the research finding. This is interesting.
So well said. Autonomy is reflected in the level of empowerment. So if I trust my team member, I will provide autonomy to my team member for the work that they are doing, and therefore empower the team member. And so before, as a precedent to that autonomy, comes the quality of relationship. So very well said, Jayashankar, that autonomy and mastery can be an outcome of high levels of relationship or high quality of relationship.
Thank you. It was from Shantanu, by the way. And Jayashankar's question is now. Jayashankar's question is now: how do you ensure long-term communication? I see the current average of team member in an org is less.
Very interesting. I mean, of course, the more you communicate, the more time also goes away from your own work. But it is a commitment that team leaders and team members have to make to each other to ensure that they are connected, they are aware, and they are supportive of each other. I think the micro coaching moments or the micro check-ins are really important. So when one of the organizations went through a shift in their performance management process and they started to have more check-ins, one of the big feedback was, I don't have the time to communicate. I don't have so much time to be connected with all my team members. But the response there was that it doesn't mean that you have to have a calendar invite and set up a Zoom meeting and then connect. It could just be about pinging, checking in on each other. It could just be about picking the phone and talking to each other. If you let the connection lapse between a team leader, team member, the subsequent communications are going to be that much more intensive and time consuming and effort intensive. But if you're connected with the team leader, team member, connects are ongoing on a daily basis, even if it's for 5 minutes, then communication itself doesn't seem as a work or effort intensive. True. But you're right, and Jayashankar, that at this point you will have to create that the will to do it.
Yeah. So he's also added one more thing to that is more a long-term communication, long-term relationship also for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the current generational mix that is coming in, you might not see long-term relationship. But if you have a solid relationship or a strong relationship within the confines of the organization, we see that that relationship continues beyond the organization as well. And you bank on those team leaders or team members to keep connecting with each other, to build your informal network, to get some of the mentoring support if you are in a situation where you need some advice.
Thank you. So the other question is from Archie Goel, sir. He asked how to mentor to do truthful self SWOT analysis.
The more truthful you are to the SWOT analysis, the more impactful that SWOT analysis is going to be. I often get asked that, in a self-assessment, how can we be sure that the person has responded to the questions accurately? And I think we don't need to police everything. If the person hasn't responded accurately, then it's not going to influence or impact the person that much. So I think self-introspection, self-awareness, self-development are really upon how true the person is to those constructs.
Thank you. So again, one question from Jay Shankar is, what and where is the balance of giving autonomy?
Well, it's a great question, Jayashankar, again, because people falter as you start to delegate, right? You start to try and see the deliverables from your own perspective on how you would have done that work. And you start to hold the team members accountable to that level of quality. And if it doesn't meet that quality, I've often seen team members revert back to themselves doing the work. I think that's a disservice to the team member and to the relationship. I think it's important as team leaders to continuously invest in the development of team members and also figure out, what to really spend your time on and what to let go. I think that's absolutely critical for leaders to develop as an attribute as well. Is where do you invest most of your time? Is it important? Is it important that some of the slides haven't made the cut as per your quality metrics? Or is it important that you take that time to coach the team member on the concept itself or the theme itself that is being presented? So I think, and it's an evolution. Everybody finds their own style. It depends a lot on the context. It depends upon the kind of work that is being delegated. So it's very hard to give a generic answer on the balance between balance and autonomy, but it really depends on the level of trust that you start to establish with the team member. And it's important from both sides to be able to continuously work to increase that level of trust.
Yeah, that answers. That's a great answer. So Ritvik, one question from my side. So yeah, we talk about the self-organizing team, autonomy, all these values and which we need, which we want to see from the team members. But as a lead, are these team members ready to take up that? From the system is they are coming. So how?
Yeah. Prashant, that's a question that should be answered at the hiring process. Unfortunately, we don't look at it the hiring process. We onboard people and then we turn to the learning team to say, these people are not ready for the next level. Can you help us make them ready? So learning team is not an answer to all problems and challenges. I think if we have hired a person and we have done enough due diligence during the hiring process, we should be confident in the talent that is coming in, one. And second, we should be honoring that hiring and providing it with the most amount of time and effort that is possible from team leader to develop them. It is our commitment to them. We owe that much that we are able to help them develop and be able to be successful in that role. I agree that there may be certain situations in which that is not possible. The hiring may have happened and you are given this person, the person is not being able to meet the requirements of the role. But then we, as a team leader, our other role is to then be very honest about that, right? And not drag it along.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So another one question coming from Jay Shankar again. Can you please help little more on micro coaching?
Yeah, I think, it's a great question, because a lot of our effort goes into being a perfectionist and saying that we'll set up time, we'll set up a coaching agenda or a coaching contract, we'll have a 0 hour, we'll understand the chemistry, then get into the coaching sessions, and coaching is like 6 to 8 months journey. I think what we miss out is that even picking up a phone and having a coaching call is as effective as the earlier process, right? So, and it's as good as, the feedback sessions can be considered as micro coaching sessions. So and what is important is that it needs to happen at the point of delivery. So something has happened and you want to give a coach, and you identify that as a coaching moment or a teachable moment. You need to connect with the team member at that point in time to be able to help them understand what was the situation, what was the action that they took, what was its impact, and what is your ask from next point onwards, right? If you structure it and say, Aditya, you managed the client call very well yesterday. Unfortunately, at the start, you were not able to connect up with the client. You didn't make a good connection. As a result, we don't have a deep relationship with the client. Next time when you have a call with a client, let's spend 5 minutes at the beginning to build a relationship with them. Now, Aditya understands, what specific action did he do, what was the impact of it, and what is the ask from the team leader to change from next point onwards.
Thanks a lot, Ritvik. I think we are coming to 1 minute left. In that, I will grab one small question. I think as you have been connected with a lot of leaders, how impactful you see that leaders and HRs are in process of transformation? How effectively are they participating, you see, in your experience so far?
Quite a bit, Prashant, quite a bit. In fact, in some of our studies, the new person at the table is the CHRO. So the CEO right now wants a direct connection with the CHRO to understand where his or her people are, and how are they doing. And so the level of, or the role of HR has really transformed in the pre-pandemic normal. And it is very heartening to see that HR has responded in the right way as well, right? Being able to provide environment for people to work effectively, being able to pivot quickly and be flexible in some of their processes, right? Being able to create a new environment where we are effective in the long term in the new normal. So I think, and it's also, as I mentioned earlier, our previous leadership development efforts didn't prepare leaders to respond to crises like this, but they have done a wonderful job at doing it using their own experiences. It's now time for us to tap into that kind of insight, convert that into some form of intelligence, and use it to augment our leader development efforts.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Ritvik. It was really a very insightful session. I can see that everyone has enjoyed with the type of questions they have putting in. Due to time restriction, I think we may not be able to take more. We will see to that we can take something offline. Okay, with this, I would like to thank you on behalf of ANI and the participants to you for your wonderful session, and look forward for your participation in future too. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your